right ahead.
Okay, the point was made that Ben Rich said something, and I've heard different versions of what he supposedly said, how many years ahead we are, and also that he said we could send E.T. home. And again, I would make the distinction between what I think we can do if we continue on this path and what we are able to do tomorrow. And having worked for major corporations, I know that we like to talk about, just give us the dough and away we will go, if you'll pardon terrible poetry. And I think we don't pay enough attention to that distinction. Did Ben mean that if we decided to open the money faucet that we could do this, that, or the other thing? Or did he mean that if you want a ticket, you can buy one tomorrow? And all kinds of projects that start and don't finish. A Cold War mentality was part of this.
Oh, yes. And then, actually, if you don't mind, Stan, that brings up another question. If we faked all the footage from the moon, Jay, I'd be very interested to know, the Soviets, now the Russians, really have some pretty good technology that rivals a lot of what we do. They would know it. Why wouldn't they blow that wide open?
Well, they did, actually. Pravda was constantly saying that the moon landings were faked. Just nobody here was picking it up. I have the issues. Also, what people don't realize is that the Russians actually landed on the moon first, not us. Luna 4, I think it was, and it left behind reflectors for lasers and a bunch of equipment. And it wasn't manned, but it was there first, proving, of course, that you can go and land stuff without ever putting a human on the moon and get stuff and have it work. Yeah. So, but the Russians were, in some ways, kind of. I don't know. They were impressed by what we were doing, but they didn't quite know how we were faking it. In fact, it was secretly completely hidden until.
No. Wait. Do you mean they were impressed? Do you mean they were impressed with our film capability, or they were impressed that we landed on the moon?
They were impressed that they thought it was faked. But they were impressed, and they weren't sure how we did it. None of these articles ever say how they faked it. They just say, "Oh, look at the shadows; they're uneven," and they point out all these other things. But nobody knew about the front screen projection until I uncovered it, and only because I'm an expert in front screen projection, and that's when I found the tool that was used to create the fakery. And the lines are undoubt. There's no doubt. They're unmistakable. There's a line where the granularity of the ground actually changes along a straight line, and that is the telltale signal of front screen projection.
Well, also, all right. This is a little unfair to Stanton because he's not a film expert. If it gets right down to the technical aspects of the film, then we should have somebody on who could dispute that if you're wrong. But certainly I can't, and I don't think Stanton can.
Even the idea that you can take 70 millimeter Ektachrome film through the Van Allen belts and be on the moon when you can't even take it through an airport detector without it getting fogged, the whole idea is just kind of absurd. I mean,
Stanton, is that really true? I mean, could you carry film?
Well, no, because radiation shielding was what I worked on for a number of years. And
okay.
The role of the Van Allen belts here gets to be a sticky one. It depends on how long you're in and what you're inside of and all the rest of that. It's complicated. It's like some people, not tonight, but some people have made it sound to me as if they thought, gee, if you get exposed to radiation, you're going to die, you're going to get cancer right away, and all this kind of stuff. And people have a deathly fear of radiation. You can see that, incidentally, on the recent flyby past Pluto. I watched a lot of coverage, read a lot, didn't see anybody talking about the fact that the energy source was a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, a little small nuclear device using plutonium, no less. And it'll run for another 20 years. It's already run for 10 years. And that's a remarkable accomplishment. Think about that. And I heard nobody saying, hey, the energy for this whole Pluto business is coming from a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, and we've used dozens of them in our deep space mission. For people who are wondering, why can't you use solar energy? Well, because the further away you get from the sun, the lower the energy intensity is.
Sure.
And, Pluto is a heck of a lot further than the Earth is from the sun. But I
totally agree with you, Stanton, that people overestimate the effects of radiation. I totally think you're right on that. Their fear drives them, and I don't think that going through the belt is going to kill you. I don't mean that. What I'm saying is that sitting on the surface of the moon with your camera, with ectochrome, film rolled into your camera, and it's 250 degrees in the sun above zero and 250 degrees below zero in the shade. How in the heck is that film going to maintain its stability? I mean, you can't put film into an oven at 200 degrees and it's just going to melt. And the whole idea is just, I don't know, it's just, as a photographer.
Well, wait a minute, I thought you said that they sent back television signals. Television may be the wrong word in this case, but...
no, that's not television.
Okay, so they were sent back, radio waves were sent back. And what happened with the film, supposedly? I don't know.
The film, there's two different things we're talking about. One is the ectochrome film that's in the still cameras that they have on their breastplate. And then the video is sent back via, it's a video camera that sends a signal back to Houston, or actually to Australia. And so they're two different mediums, is what I'm saying.
Okay, but the motion picture footage that you're talking about is basically the TV stuff, right? Mm-hmm. The Kubrick stuff, if you will.
The very low-quality video stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so we agree it was low quality. I mean, after all, it was in the 60s and early 70s. And could we do better now, for example?
Oh, yeah, much better. That's the thing is that's why it's so irritating that they erased the original tapes, because what we're looking at is second, third, fourth generation. And if I could get my hands on the first generation, then I can maybe prove that they did go even. But I don't have that proof now.
In my mind, I cannot picture anybody, who's got their hands on the moon landing film going, we don't need this anymore.
We need the tape.
Yeah, toss this one and toss this one. We need to clean this place out and toss that one. Mankind's greatest achievement, and they throw it away?
Yep.
I agree that is suspicious, and, there's no way around that. Or stupid. I mean, maybe they go together.
Or maybe you agree a little bit that it is suspicious?
If they've got me...
I do agree that it's suspicious.
If I had that access to the first generation videotape, I would be able to, without any doubt, be able to tell you whether it was fake or real.
Okay, well, now maybe you're talking about motivation for throwing it away.
Exactly.
I really hate jumping over on your side, Jay, but I mean, why else? It's such a stupid thing to do. There's got to be a motivation.
Well, it is, and I had a friend, he was a rocket scientist named Bill Wood. I think he's still alive. If you're out there, Bill, hey, long time no see. And he told me that he was at a conference of rocket engineers, and they were putting forth this rocket that was going to soft land here on Earth. And they said, hey, this is the first time that we've ever done a soft landing. And Bill Woods, Dr. Wood raised his hand and said, that's not true. We've done 6 soft landings already. What are you talking about? And they didn't even consider that the Apollo landings were, credible even in this group.
I don't know what to say about that. And certainly I will try. I mean, I've met several astronauts, and I do have difficulty with saying that remember, because part of your story now is that they had to be going through hoops here on Earth at a soundstage, right?
No, it wouldn't be. Because of the gold visor conveniently being used, we don't know who those people are in those suits. I mean, we don't know who they are. You can't see them. You can't see their faces. We don't know who they are. And again, why are they using the gold visor? What's the point of that? Except maybe to hide their faces, I don't understand
gold is a good reflecting material and all that sort of stuff, but
could be true. I mean, that point.
Stanton, it sounds like he's beginning to talk you into it.
Well, there's an old, not enough data. I have a big gray basket, a very large gray basket. Everybody wants, I get a lot of calls, they want a yes or a no on everything.
Right.
And not a maybe. And I often have to say, look, I don't know enough to be able to come down on one side or the other. It's up in the air in space.
Yeah, I remember your gray basket, indeed. So you're almost ready to put this into that basket?
Well, yes, because I have a lot of questions and I don't know how to get answers to many of them. And as Jay just said, there'd be a difference if we had the original footage. And, if you talk about bonehead plays, certainly, having that footage gone seems to be one of the worst that I'm aware of.
Well, then there was
that we don't know about.
Yet. Then remember, there was the destruction of all the Roswell records too, right?
Yeah, somehow they got destroyed.
My guests are Jay Widener. He's an expert on film, and we've got Stanton Friedman here. I keep wanting to call him doctor. Sorry about that. So let's see where we agree and where we disagree. We seem to be...
Well, there's a point I'd like to make, Art.
Fire away.
To go back to Ben Rich and nuclear. When you talk about how far advanced technology is, I find that many people, a typical example is that we have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. These exist now. They're operating out on the high seas there that can operate for 18 years without refueling. And people look at me like, what are you talking about? I say they're nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and they operate without refueling. This makes an enormous difference on your tactics on the ocean if you don't need to worry about how much fuel you're using.
Mm-hmm.
That's an enormous impact. So that's part of what I meant about maybe it's technology that we are thinking about versus what we already have. In this case, many people are shocked. It's like people don't even appreciate the fact that nuclear-powered submarines, we heard an awful lot about German U-boats during the war, what a threat they were to the convoys in the oceans and so forth and so on. But they could stay underwater for maybe a day because you need air for the diesel engines. Taking care of the people is easy. Air for the engines is not. Now we have submarines that can go around the world underwater. And when they go past a beautiful island, they take periscope leave, as one guy put it to me. Which is a clever remark, but it's true that's an enormous advance, over the past, and a lot of people simply aren't aware of it. And
what we're talking about here, Jay said we have jumped, even back then, we have jumped ahead to some sort of electromagnetic drive, some sort of something that would get us from here to the moon, and we had it back then.
Well, I saw the recent article, and it really wasn't saying we have it. This is a study being done about a possible means of doing it.
I understand, Stanton, but he's talking about having had that back when we did the moon landings that he says were fake photographed.
Yeah, and I don't think we did, and to tell you the truth. Again, there's such a fine line, if there is any, between truth and half-truth and no truth when it comes to technology. I mean, I've seen all kinds of claims. I'm a flying saucer guy, and I hear all kinds of stories which turn out to be baloney.
So, Stanton, let me ask you a question. You don't believe that we back-engineered anything from Roswell or anything like that, right?
No, I didn't say that. Again, let me give you an example of something I did think we did learn from Roswell. I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident, and my view about what you would do when you got all the pieces of wreckage, you'd send them out to your best classified labs, and you'd say, what is this stuff? This fine foil-like material, very strong, very lightweight, etc. And a guy comes back and said, it's a combination of samarium and cobalt. Why would you put those two things together? Not your problem. You send it out to somebody else. What are the electromagnetic, thermal, nuclear properties of this stuff? And the guy comes. You don't tell him where you got it. He doesn't have a need to know for that. Maybe he thinks it came from a spy, see? And he comes back and says, the highest magnetic moment I've ever measured. What a wonderful permanent magnet material this would be. And pretty soon you're building ghetto blasters with samarium cobalt magnets in the speakers. That's real, incidentally. And I for a while, several years, did a weekly science commentary for CBC Radio here in Fredericton. And I did one. I read a lot. It was fun. And I did one on new and better permanent magnet materials, neodymium, boron, and iron. I'm not making these up. They're real. At the end of the article, it said the original work on samarium cobalt was done at Wright Air Development Center, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I just laughed my head off. In other words, I think that the basic idea came from somebody saying, hey, what is this stuff? A second, in my book, there's a picture of me with my hand on the Apollo 12 command module. I spoke to the NASA people there in Southern California, and they took me on a tour and took my picture with the command module and stuff. Strangely enough, they didn't want the North American Rockwell people to come to the presentation, only the NASA people. Don't ask me to explain that because I don't have an explanation for it. But and the point was that they were very interested on the one hand, and on the other hand, who knew what the real stuff going on was? And I didn't.
Well, all right. Again, we're closer to it. That, but we're in more agreement than disagreement. Do you both believe it is possible? This is a straight-out question that from the crash at Roswell, we built something that could take us to the moon and back real quick.
No, I don't believe that.
No?
I believe that it's that in combination with what else we had, yes. Not that alone, though, but in combination with the other technologies that we had discovered and also developed. Don't forget, Hitler was not just financing these guys to create exotic technologies. He was also sending expeditions into Tibet, into northern Africa, into Peru, looking for ancient advanced technologies. He admitted it. And these expeditions were run by the SS, the occult division of the SS. So he was making a major plan to try to recover as much of the past as possible and apply it. And when you take that and then you add the Roswell stuff, 1947, hey, by 1955 you could be really far advanced, especially with the backing of the United States, which was the richest country on earth.
Well, one of the problems here is that if you gave the smartest people on the planet a cheap digital wristwatch, say $25 wristwatch, back in the 30s, he would know it was a watch, and he'd know there's a battery there, but he had no way to examine the chip, or certainly no way to duplicate it. And so, it's like Christopher Columbus, I need a nuclear-powered submarine, and I got unlimited money. Can you build one for me? And the answer would have been no. There's too big a gap between where we are and where we would have to be. And that's the point I was trying to make earlier about the difference between having good ideas and being in a position to build, create, duplicate, whatever you want to call it, that technology. Ideas aren't enough.
Okay, so you're saying we were not in that position, so we could not have had such craft.
So then we didn't go to the moon.
That's what I'm saying. And also, if we had such craft, why wouldn't we be using it instead of some of our airplanes that are currently, like how expensive they are? But,
all right.
What I'm trying to say is I don't think that if we had advanced technology that would be useful in the building of call them bombers as a generic class of craft able to put destruction all over the place, I don't think that we would not do it. What bothers me is that the military budget on this planet this year is approximately $1 trillion. That's an awful lot of dough. That tells you something about the people on this planet. And I think if we had the kind of technology that would enable you to build a bunch of fancy vehicles, aircraft in particular, I think we would. And so, there's a disconnect, in other words, between the idea of, well, we've got all this technology, but we're not using it, or we're hiding it.
But I don't understand, because the military for sure has advanced technologies, aircraft and things, and the two maxims of the military to win a battle is take the high ground and keep everything secret. And so perfecting this kind of technology would thoroughly satisfy those two things that you need to have to win a war.
Why would you keep building the old stuff?
Because you want your enemies to all think that that's what you've got, so that when the time comes and you can strike quickly. Surprise and the high ground are the two most valued things in military operations, and this kind of weaponry gives you both of those advantages, but you have to keep it a secret, otherwise you lose your advantage. And
well, maybe it's mythological too. Maybe you want the other guy to think you've got this technology, even though you don't. That's good psychology too.
Remember Star Wars?
Except that I've actually seen some of this technology with my own eyes. I was out near Vandenberg Air Force Base 10 years ago, and I saw, a craft flying right over Vandenberg Air Force Base. There was nobody scrambling their jets. There was nobody going up to look at the craft. They had to have seen it. It was right over the base. I'm sure it was military.
Well, now you're off into different territory. You're off into ufology, and I think we're all with you here. That could have been why they didn't scramble something. I don't know.
Well,
maybe
all I'm saying is that it's in the military's advantage to keep these things a secret. I think we can all agree on that. How advanced they are, I don't know. If Stanton,
I had a clearance for 14 years, and I have. There are some limits on what secrets you can keep, even though there are plenty of secrets that have been kept. One of them is to cover up the mistakes you make. Well, isn't that true?
Yep.
You don't want people to know because, whoops, look what we did. Sorry about that, folks.
What I'm trying to understand, though, is you're saying that Philip Corso is not correct, and we didn't have all these.
Yes, I certainly am saying that Corso is not correct. I've written about Corso. I've got an article that I sent to people, Fraud in Ufology, and I focus on let me be specific. I don't want to just cast dispersions.
All right, gentlemen, before you get specific, we're at a break, so I don't want to start this and not be able to finish it. Okay. When we come back, the subject is going to be Philip Corso, so stay right there.
For Dark Matter News, I'm Leo Ashcraft. Millions of locusts have descended on farmlands in southern Russia, devouring entire fields of crops and causing officials to declare a state of emergency in the region. A vast area of at least 800 hectares is currently being affected as the swarms of insects, each measuring about 8 centimeters long, annihilate fields of corn and other crops. It's been more than 30 years since this part of southern Russia suffered such a dense plague of locusts. Officials say at least 10% of crops have already been destroyed, and the locust feeding frenzy is far from over, threatening to devastate the livelihoods of local farmers. On state television, Russian news broadcasts are linking the plague to climate change, connecting the phenomenon to recent flooding and higher-than-average temperatures. Officials from the Russian Ministry of Agriculture have declared a state of emergency, but appear helpless to prevent the destruction. First NASA Chief Scientist Ellen Stofan openly admitted that alien life is imminent, and just last Tuesday, Dr. John Grunsfield of NASA's Science Mission Directorate announced the agency was on the verge of discovering life on planets other than Earth. Some say that Stoughton and Grunsfield hide the fact that NASA has been lying to the public about known extraterrestrial life for decades now, and that ETs have likely been visiting Earth for centuries. Grunsfield told a House committee, "Are we alone? Many people on the planet want to know. We're on the cusp of being able to answer that question." And Stefan's recent comments were even more bold, saying, "I think we're going to have strong indications of life beyond Earth within a decade. We're on the verge of things that people have wondered about for millennia. Within all of our lifetimes, we're going to understand that there is life on other bodies in the solar system. We're going to understand the implications of that for life here on Earth." Her declaration is synchronized with the agency's recent discovery of water of 5 of Jupiter's and Saturn's moons. We were also told by NASA recently that their Kepler mission found another Earth in the habitable zone in our universe circulating around a star that resembles our sun. NASA defines habitable based on the ability of a planet to pool water ostensibly to support life as we know it. Dark Matter News. A massive sinkhole has swallowed up an intersection in Brooklyn, New York, snarling up traffic and causing waters and gas outages to nearby buildings. Local residents are already joking about turning it into a rent-controlled apartment. Dramatic images show the gaping hole in the corner of 64th Street and 5th Avenue, located just a short block away from the I-278. The crater appeared shortly after 7 Tuesday morning. There were no injuries. Witnesses say there were cars on it just moments before, and rooftop surveillance cameras captured the cave-in. The fabled Bishopville, South Carolina swamp creature, known as Lizard Man, appears to have surfaced again Sunday afternoon. Sarah, a Sumter woman who says she went to church with a friend Sunday morning, stepped out of the sanctuary to see the Lizard Man running along the tree line. So she did what anyone else would do. She took a picture with her phone. She says they were just a mile or so from Scape Ore Swamp, the site of a similar spotting of what may also be the Lizard Man in May. A man who asked not to be identified submitted a short video of what he thought was the Lizard Man Monday morning. He said he took the video in May while coon hunting, but kept its existence quiet until he saw the reports of Lizard Man outside a church. Scape Ore Swamp is the area where most of the Lizard Man sightings over the last 30 years have been focused. Yes, there's quite a lot of local lore surrounding the reptilian humanoid, including the first sighting in the summer of 1988. There have been searches by Destination Truth and Mysteries at the Museum as recently as 2013. In a 2014 episode of Ancient Aliens, the Lizard Man was mentioned. The tales have been documented in a cryptology book titled Lizard Man, the story of the Bishopville monster. But the creature has not been seen in more than a decade, until now, possibly creating yet another ripple in the swampy waters around Bishopville. I'm Leo Ashcraft for Dark Matter News.
The subject would appear to be Philip Corso, and I'm good with that. I interviewed Philip Corso, actually in a series of interviews, and boiled down, his contention was, we took the information from the crash at Roswell and parceled it out to American industrial giants to build many of the things that we now enjoy. Do both of you agree with that premise?
I do.
But that's what he claimed, yes.
Okay, so that's not agreement. You think that's exactly what he did. You believed Philip Corso, Jay, correct?
Yeah, I listened to your interviews all those years ago.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, Philip,
Okay.
Philip was pretty convincing. Stanton, what do you have to say about him?
Well, I did meet him more than once, but I checked on him. And let me tell you some of the things I found. For one thing, he claimed in the book The Day After Roswell that he had been a member of the National Security Council under Eisenhower.
Right.
That's pretty high as far as advising to the president. You know, you don't get any higher in the NSC. Well, I checked with the Eisenhower Library. I've been there many times, and they know me, so I told them what he had claimed, and they checked, and I got a letter back saying that he not only was never a member of the NSC, but he never attended a meeting. They keep track of that sort of stuff. And I sent a copy of the letter to the lawyer, Peter Gersten, for whom Phil had signed a sworn statement about his background.
Right.
And the lawyer showed it to Phil. Don't you think we should take that out, that claim? No. He didn't think so. a second example was that one of the things, remember that he wasn't saying that this was going on right after Roswell. Roswell happened in 1947, early July. He was saying that this happened after he started to work for General Trudeau, the Army Foreign Technology Division at the Pentagon. This is after 1960. So first of all, you have to think that, gee, what they left that wreckage lying around. He said he got a filing cabinet of Roswell materials, and that was his job to parcel it out.
Right.
A couple of things that he took credit for. There are no references in the book, which I find very frustrating, of course, were things. One, a guy got a Nobel Prize for work done years before Corso came along. That was clearly a lie. To put it bluntly, there were other things that we know the sequence of how those new technologies came into being, lasers and other things. And Corso wasn't part of it. Remember, he was not an engineer or a scientist. And remember that Strom Thurmond, who served, I still think he has the record for serving more years in the Senate than anybody, or close to it if he's not still the record holder. He withdrew the forward that was used in the book because he thought it was for a different book about intelligence agency work kind of stuff. And when his people found out what the book was about, he withdrew it. So also he claimed that he, in July 6th, at Fort Riley, Kansas, his bowling buddy let him look into this crate, which there was a blue liquid in which there was an alien body. Now, I've heard some egregious violations of security, but that outdoes them all. There is no way that's going to happen. It's like saying you're driving around with nuclear weapons in the truck and you park outside a McDonald's and leave the truck open.
Okay, but you cannot prove that did not happen. The other stuff, I guess, if you can...
The dates are wrong. The dates are wrong. We know the date when Rancher Brazel came into Roswell.
Right.
And that was the 6th. And we also know that if there's one thing the 509th had at Roswell, the 509th Bomb Group, they're the guys who dropped the atomic bombs, you know. If there's one thing they had was airplanes. Why would they put stuff on a truck? I mean, they put nuclear weapons on airplanes. They certainly trusted them enough to be confident.
Right. I'm just trying to make a distinction between what you have proven are lies and what you speculate just couldn't be. But if you can prove one lie or two lies, then you can call it all into question. That I agree with.
We did a radio program, you know about radio programs. I'm here, he's there, and the host is someplace else.
Yes.
Just like now. And I asked how he knew the date of July 6th. I asked, did you have a diary or a notebook? I was hoping he had something like that because that would be great. Well, I know when I was transferred there. It turns out that was in March or April. The date makes no sense. And like I say, I worked under security for 14 years, and the idea of a bowling buddy in the military letting you look at a crate that has an alien body in it that is sitting around unguarded, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, all right. But in terms of flat-out lies, his work with the government that you documented, that one does seem to be simply untrue. Jay, any comments?
Well, no, actually, it doesn't surprise me that he's caught fibbing a couple times. I read the book, and I wondered sometimes when I was reading it whether it was all the truth or not. But I just want to get one thing clear here. You're saying that there's not really been much back engineering of anything, that all those statements are
well, no. He was saying Philip Corso didn't tell the truth. Now, look, if somebody lies, I'm sorry, but if I was an attorney and I was in court, I would have the whole damn thing thrown out successfully if I proved he lied.
Yep.
Well, there's another part of this, too. I started to say before about when I spoke to the NASA people, what I wanted to get at and didn't, my problem, was that the shape of the command module, and like it came home to me when I got my hand on it. It's a round, blunt body. I always thought, most people thought, that a high-speed aircraft has to have a plain nose, sharp wings, highly streamlined, like the X-15 or something like that. And we wind up with a round, blunt body coming back at 25,000 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I checked and found that we did do wind tunnel tests in 47 of round, blunt bodies. So I think some smart person said, hey, if these guys are able to go this fast with something that looks like that, maybe we ought to look into it. So I think, and there may be other subtle things, maybe not so subtle, that have been done, in the course of the Cold War that we learned from. Remember, I'm giving as it happens, I'm giving a paper Saturday in Nova Scotia, Liverpool, Nova Scotia. Everybody's welcome. In which I talk about crash saucers from Roswell to Shag Harbor, which is also in Nova Scotia. I talk about 5 different events, and who knows how many more there were. They got better at covering things up. So I'm not saying we haven't been stimulated to look at new directions, that we haven't directly learned specific things that could be of interest. I certainly hope we did. If you got that much wreckage, there ought to be people. I mean, I think that was one of the functions of Operation Majestic 12, is to coordinate the efforts that how do we find out useful stuff here? You don't parcel that out to 20 different places. So, and I've got a book, Top Secret Magic, that goes into that. And, I don't know if we, certainly, Art, you and I never talked about this, I don't think, about General Carol Bolender.
No.
It's an incredible tale. He was an Air Force general, an engineer on the Lunar Excursion Module. Jay, bear with me. I said Lunar Excursion Module. And he was asked in 1969, after the Condon Committee people had recommended in early 69 that Project Blue Book be closed. He was asked, had no previous connection with Blue Book, Air Force Project Blue Book, what should we do about Project Blue Book? And he wrote a memo, which we didn't see until 10 years later, and I think then it was inadvertently released. On the surface, it didn't look spectacular until you looked at what it said inside. In the memo, he said, and his memo resulted in the closure of Project Blue Book at the end of the year. He said, reports of UFOs which could affect national security are made in accordance with JNAP, Joint Army Navy Air Force Publication 146, or Air Force Manual 55-11, and are not part of the Blue Book system. That's an extraordinary statement.
It is. It is.
And 2 paragraphs later, he says, if we close Project Blue Book, the public won't have a place to report UFO sightings. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be investigated using the procedures established for that purpose. Mm-hmm. And yet the Air Force for umpteen years has been saying, Blue Book was it, that's it, no national security. No
I know. All right.
Well, I decided I'd try to talk to him. So I located him. It's easier to find generals with unusual names than John Smith, for example. And I talked to General Bolender, retired by this time, and I said, it sounds to me like you're saying that there are 2 separate communication channels here. One for reports that could affect national security, and I just heard one, I told him, about a saucer going down the runway at a Strategic Air Command base where nuclear weapons are stored. By definition, that's a problem for national security. And then the other problem, if my wife and I are walking down the street and see a saucer go by, big deal, happens all the time. He agreed with me. 2 separate communication channels. And so that's extraordinary, and most people are totally unaware of Bolender's statement.
All right, you brought up
the New York Times.
Yeah, you brought up the LEM, right?
Lunar Excursion Module.
Yes. A main argument of those who believe we never went to the moon is made that the astronauts in their suits could not fit into the LEM. Have either one of you heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, as in you believe that, Jay?
Well, I mean, I've looked at the LEM that's at the Smithsonian, and what the conspiracy theorists on that front are saying is that with the backpack and the suit and everything, they can't get through the small opening.
That's right.
And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm trying to imagine two astronauts putting on those suits inside the LEM, because they'd have to be both have to be on before they open the hatch.
Right.
And I've been inside and looked inside that. And I can't imagine 2 6-foot men with backpacks in that room. I mean, it's so small. I can't even hardly imagine one guy, let alone two. Yet they're telling us that they had two. There's another thing about the Apollo missions which needs to be brought up, besides the improving production values and all that. And that is the fact that and Stan, you're going to appreciate this one, I know. I'm a former computer programmer. Besides being a filmmaker, I've always wanted to learn how to program computers. I learned COBOL and assembly and all this. And I know one thing about
that word in a long time.
Yeah. I know one thing about technical things. They never go right the first time. I don't care what anyone says. They never go right the first time. The only incident that I can ever think of where everything sailed perfectly the first time is Apollo 11. We have over 500,000 technical things that had to be done between launch and the set down in the ocean, and all of them functioned perfectly. They all functioned perfectly on Apollo 12. They functioned perfectly on 14, 15, 16, and 17. No glitches, nothing. The only glitch in the entire thing was Apollo 13. And I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I work with technology all day long. I know it is prone to every kind of glitch possible.
So you're saying what? Just too amazing?
Wait a minute now.
Too amazing?
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Too amazing. Too amazing.
The first atomic bomb worked. That was very complicated too. Never been done before.
Not as complicated as launching into Earth orbit, going from the Earth to the Moon, then going down and never tested, taking a soft landing. The only soft landing test that was ever tried was by Neil Armstrong in New Mexico, and he almost killed himself. And yet the next time they do the soft landing on a planet they've never been to, it goes absolutely perfect. It's unbelievable. I'm sorry. I just don't buy it. Not at all.
Well, as I say, the atom bomb worked. Admittedly, to some people's surprise.
Well, he is making a fair point. There's a lot more moving parts and things that had to go right once they figured out the atomic bomb. It was probably physically simple compared to going to the moon, setting down, walking around, getting back in, and coming home.
Yeah.
The number of technical issues that face you trying to just get to the moon and not miss by a 500 miles, it's astounding what you have to go through. And they did it. And they did it perfectly, absolutely perfectly, no glitches at all. And I can't buy it.
Remember, there was a fire that killed 3 astronauts too.
In 1964, in 1964 there was a fire, and 5 years later they got to the moon, but. Even the fire itself is like, you talk about stupid. They've got open electrical circuits inside a pure oxygen environment, and no one can figure out that this may not be a good idea. I mean, that fire that killed those 3 astronauts is absolutely one of the most stupid things I've ever seen in my life. I cannot believe it's as stupid as taping over the tapes. And
I was going to say, you got another one.
and these are the guys that got us to the moon. I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of intelligence going on.
We don't live in a perfect world, that's for sure. No, I think there are a number of remarkable things that we're talking about here. And I'm convinced we did go to the moon. And I've met several of the astronauts, and I'm convinced they weren't off on a soundstage someplace else. Because remember, it isn't enough to say that what the public was shown was fraudulent, but the astronauts had to be involved in that. You're saying we don't know who was in the suits.
No, we don't.
So well, even that means that it was a lie as well. I mean,
it's deeper than that, Stanton. It's deeper than that. That's why I brought up the incidences with Edgar Mitchell and Buzz Aldrin. There's some kind of psychological operation going on where these guys, there's no way in the world that I'm going to go to the moon and not remember it, period. I don't care what you say. I'm going to remember every second. I'm going to relive those moments my entire life. And neither Buzz Aldrin or Edgar Mitchell can even say it. They can't even talk about what happened to them on the moon. They just can't say it. Neil Armstrong never did an interview. He stayed on his ranch in Ohio and never went out, never did anything. It's over and over again. You find these odd reactions by the astronauts, and again, I don't think they're lying. I think it's much more complicated than that. I think it's. I don't know.
Brainwashing, if you will.
Well, I was at a party with a bunch of NASA people, and this is in '94 in Cody, Wyoming. And if Richard Hogan's listening, he knows what I'm talking about.
Got to be a quick story here. We're coming on.
Yeah, and I met the psychiatrist that debriefed the astronauts, and I was so happy to meet her. And I said, "So what was the debriefing like?" And she looked at me with this puzzled face, and she said, "You know what? I can't really remember what they were like."
That's a great line.
You know, there is a lot of this. There is a lot of unusual behavior on the part of the astronauts. And then there's this clown running around holding Bibles up in front of them. Yep. I think he's been clocked by astronauts a few times.
Buzz Aldrin clocked him. Yeah, he knocked his clock out. Yeah.
Buzz did, yes.